Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining and welcome back to Wall Street Silver. Joining us today is Thomas Perilla, president of Perilla Investment Group. Welcome back, sir.
Hi, Ivan. Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday. I'm super grateful to have you on, talk to Wall Street Silver about everything that's happening in the markets. I wanted to start off with gold and silver. Where do you think gold is going from now to the end of 2024? Did your projections change a bit from last time?
A little bit. I've adjusted. I think gold will go up about 30% between now and the end of the year. Should put it around 3,100. Silver, I see a little higher, maybe 40%, which would put you around the 42 mark. And the real thing I see about silver, it's a tough one to put a projection on because right now you're running a huge deficit in silver. The last number I saw, silver is running a $215 million ounce deficit compared to supply. So that's a situation where all of a sudden, you could be at 35 or 40 and all of a sudden you're at 75 or 80 just
Hmm.
because you've got that situation taking place. And same thing in gold. I mean, my projections of 3,100, I think that's a normal gold market, but we're going to be heading into a US election and you don't know what's going to happen there. And I just saw the numbers come out here earlier today. The bullion banks are at a record high in gold right now for shorts. So
Really?
yeah, so they're sitting there, just almost begging the market to go ahead and bust them. And if they do, we've seen that last week when we had some pretty good sized jumps as intraday. All of a sudden, you can go. You might see gold move go from 23.56 to 26 in a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And Thomas, what happens, like you were talking earlier about the deficit in silver, particularly over 200 million ounces. What happens when it gets to 300 and 400 million ounces in the next 5 to 10 years, or maybe even earlier? Then what happens when you can't even get that silver because all the silver mines, I've heard that there's not too many straight silver mines. They're always a byproduct. So yeah, what happens when that deficit increases? Where do you get the silver from?
one of the guys I consider to be maybe the top commodities trader on LinkedIn, a fellow named Pete Thomas. Pete was the commodities trader for the Hunt brothers, so he knows the business.
Wow. Yeah, yeah.
He thinks that within 20 years, he thinks that's the silver supply lifespan.
20 from
20
now to
years.
20 years.
He thinks in 20 years, silver, we may be basically running out of it to the point where it's very hard to get. Now, in the shorter term, I think what you'll see is as it moves up, you're going to see premiums move up from the dealers into like the 35% range. So it's going to get tighter and tighter. Right now, I'm looking at the numbers. In the last 8 years, silver production costs have doubled, but the price of silver has only gone up 50%.
Right.
So that tells you as the costs are going up, they've got to move the price of silver higher in order to keep production moving. And you're going to need a lot of silver. If these electric vehicles are going to come out, every one of them has to have silver in it. Same thing, you've got 10 different uses for silver other than just a store of value. But the interesting thing is, I looked at some of these numbers today when you're looking at gold and silver. Since 1971, when we were foolish enough to leave the gold standard, we've lost 98.5% of our purchasing power.
That's insane.
And you take a guy that, worked, say, 45 years in a steel mill, and, back in those days, he would use the terms like, play the stock market. He didn't. He kept it in good old Uncle Sam, held his dollars. He got 1.5% left from
Yeah.
40 years, 40 years of working, overtime, saving his money, doing all the right things. And they stole 98.5% of his money. It's criminal, but they did it slowly and they did it right in front of him and they got away with it. And it's just, to me, it's just sad. It shouldn't
Uh,
happen like
and
that.
and the younger generation now grow like just living in the 2024. If the purchasing power is already eroded by 98 point some percent, what do you have left for the next 20, 30 years?
Yeah, this is some staggering numbers. I wrote some of these things down. In 1913, when they created the Federal Reserve System,
Mm-hmm.
$1 could buy 30 Hershey bars. Um, you go in 1933, $1 could buy 10 bottles of beer. 1944, $1 could buy 20 bottles of Coca-Cola. 1971, $1 would buy 17 oranges. Today, $1 buys you one McDonald's coffee.
Yeah, if that.
It's insane. I mean, and that's the thing. I think people are now beginning to realize what the Federal Reserve has done since we've gone off of the gold standard. Just from 2000 to 2021, the money supply has increased from 4.6 trillion to 19.5 trillion.
Yeah, that's insane.
And the thing, if you look at it from the almost a scam point of view, just the term Federal Reserve, they did that on purpose to make people believe that the federal part is a part of the federal government,
Right.
when in fact they are a private corporation. And we did not vote on that, but we handed the entire money supply of the United States over to a private corporation, the Federal
Right. They,
Reserve.
they didn't want to call it a private reserve. They called
Right.
it the Federal Reserve.
I bet if you went on the street, 9 out of 10 people, if you asked them, they would say, yeah, sure, it's a part of the federal government. But if you think about it, years ago, the fellow that owns Goodwill, he did the same thing. He named his company
Mm.
Goodwill and convinced people to donate all their stuff to him. And then later they found out he was making a huge amount of profit because those goods weren't going to the homeless. He was taking them in, cleaning them, and then marking them up to a huge profit and
Yeah.
selling. But he put the name Goodwill on his building, on his company. So people thought it was a charity.
Yeah, yeah, of course. It's a goodwill.
The Federal Reserve is no more than that. They're goodwill, just at the federal government level. What they've done
There's a lot of
is just
people, sorry
terrible.
to cut you off, Tom, but there's a lot of people I talk to just in on a regular basis on or just like a day to day, just regular good old people. And they think presidents print money. Like they think presidents control banks.
Yeah, I think purposely not done a good job of really educating people on that.
Right.
The fact that they put up such a fuss when someone says they want to audit the Fed, why would that be a problem? I mean, if you go and if IBM has to sit through an audit, if Oracle has to sit through an audit or 3Com, why wouldn't the Federal Reserve? They control your money supply. That gives everyone the impression if you pull back the blinds and see what's underneath of it, you've got a real problem. You've got a mess on your hands.
What happens if you would audit the Fed? What do they not want you to see? Is that why they don't want to, you can't audit them?
The only thing I can think of is that they're sitting on losses that are so astronomical that
That's more than what the actual number of debt is in the US. It could be like
you know,
40, 50, 60 trillion.
yep. So they're basically insolvent, but they're not because they've got the printing machine.
Right.
So, you might, like in your case, let's say you ran out of money, but you had a printer in your basement, you go try and print dollars. Okay, you just keep doing it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's all they do. The problem is they're doing it with our money.
Right.
Um,
And it dilutes the system to the point where your purchasing power goes to nothing, and then sooner or later the US dollar will collapse like every other empire.
yep. And I'll tell you, you look at what they're doing right now with raising interest rates in order to combat inflation. I would say, I would really argue this. There's two different types of inflation. One where they're printing dollars over time that they've done since 71.
Right.
And the second part is just the short term, our global supply chain. The government has broken our global supply chain. They did it when COVID was, when the shutdowns came in. If they could fix the supply chains, I think you'd see inflation come back down. Right now, the Federal Reserve only has one tool to combat that, quantitative tightening and raising interest rates. And that's what they've done. But what they're doing is they're not doing anything to really beat down inflation, but they're crushing certain parts of the economy. Commercial real estate right now is in an emergency situation.
Right.
I'm looking at parts of it that were considered to be foolproof. Multifamily housing had never gone down. And right now, I look at the distress numbers for multifamily housing in 1 month have jumped from 3.7% to 7.2. So now 7.2% of all multifamily housing in the United States is in distress on their funding.
That's crazy.
A huge amount. I mean, I just saw one PIMCO Columbia property. They modify their loans, and that's what these guys keep doing. They pretend and they extend. They've extended their loan out to July of 2025 now, 1.7 billion. The property valuations inside of that have dropped by 30%.
How long can you keep extending these things? Can you use it forever?
Theoretically, if the bank tried to keep that loss off their books, they could just come back out next year and try to do it again. The problem is you make that problem bigger and bigger with the hopes you're going to have a housing turnaround at some point and you'll be saved.
Like if the
But
market goes up 30% or 40%.
right.
But if it's
And
going down, yeah, if it's going down, it's just crazy.
and right now we've been in an environment where equity prices have gone up. I mean, you've got an entire generation of people, between 20 and 30 have never lived through a bear market. What if we went into a bear market? Now you got commercial real estate hanging on by a thread. The regional banks are extended all the way out. I mean, one little thread, one little thing gets pulled out from under them, and you're going to see 5 or 6 of them go down.
Right.
And the problem is they're sitting on treasuries that have huge losses on their treasuries, and they're sitting on commercial real estate, which also has huge losses. And these are big deals. I mean, like that's a $1.7 billion loan. So you're not talking about a guy with a $250,000 mortgage that defaults and loses his house. You're talking about 1.7 billion. Now those add up. Those go right to the bottom line. And you talk about a regional bank, that's hard for them to handle.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely crazy. And it's whatever's happening from now in the next 6 months, especially what's happening in with Trump and how the possibly gonna throw him in jail on the 15th before the RNC convention.
It's insanity.
Yeah.
And I know people on the left are right now kind of rejoicing it.
Oh
But
yeah.
what they all have to remember is, we go through cycles, political cycles, business cycles, and sooner or later the shoe's on the other foot. Now, do you want to turn this into a country where all of a sudden then the Republicans take control and they start putting, Hillary Clinton goes to jail, Biden goes to jail. Do you want that kind of a nation? I mean, to the rest of the world, it's just going to look like a banana republic.
Well,
Real
it will
estate.
happen if Trump wins. I promise you, all these people who've tried to have tried to throw him in jail, like what you said, sooner or later it'll turn.
It's sad. And what will happen at some point in time, people are going to look at us and say, okay, here's a nation indebted up to their eyeballs. Their political process is a complete joke. They
Right.
weaponize,
Their
yeah.
border crisis is insane.
And you got your FBI, CIA, and Department of Justice all weaponized. It's the opposite of a free nation. I mean, that's what we told the world. Freedom is here.
Yeah.
And instead,
Sorry to cut you off. I seen a video this week of a general at one of these Navy bases in the US's or one of these military bases, and he said they get like 3 to 5 like foreign Chinese or like invaders every day. They just come, they'll try to like volunteer, and this he says he see like 4 or 5 a day. And obviously with everything happening on the border, you see foreign nationals coming in and
it's just insane. And at some point, they're going to look at the United States and say, here's a political system broken. Here's a country indebted up to their eyeballs. And then you're going to lose faith in the dollar. And I still say the dollar is going to go down somewhere around the 90 level. And then over the next 3 to 5 years, down to 70. As soon as the Fed pivots, you're going to see a real major hit come in on the US dollar. And in that particular case, again, you're sitting in absolutely a perfect position if you're in gold, silver, platinum. And I would continue to, really urge, I know you have your listeners for years now, take physical delivery of your metals. Don't leave them in the
absolutely.
safety deposit box. Don't leave them in a vault somewhere. Hold your metals because you're going to need them. And just keep stacking every month. I mean, that's the key. Don't time it, stack it every month, and don't worry
Yeah.
about the prices. And if you happen to get a dip, a correction, buy heavier.
Yeah, I totally agree
Otherwise,
with you.
just monthly, just keep, putting it away.
Absolutely. Well, Tom, it's such a huge pleasure having you come down to Wall Street Silver as always. And we'd love to have you back on, maybe even on the 15th or the 14th, right around what happens with Trump's trial, and we'll see what happened to the market. You never know what happens to gold or silver by then. So yeah, I'd love to have you back on.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think it's going to be a great year. Drill
Yeah.
seasons are kicking off for the miners. Yeah, I think we're just going to have a lot of fun this year. A
Yeah.
lot of turmoil, so you feel bad about that part. But as far as the sector goes, I think we're just in the exact right sector in the exact right time in history.
Yeah, it's prime time. Yeah.
Yeah, the next 5 years is going to be a lot of money made in precious metals.
Precious metals. Yeah. Well, thank you again, Tom, and hopefully, I'd love to have you back, especially in the
Yeah,
next
for
week or two.
sure.
Awesome. Talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Ivan.